Have you ever encountered an error while coding that just leaves you scratching your head? It can be incredibly frustrating, especially when you're trying to get your app up and running. If that's you, stick around because today we're diving into a common issue with Android services. I totally get it. You're working on your Android app and suddenly you hit a wall with the error message. Context.startForegroundService did not then call Service.startForeground. You're not alone in this struggle. Many developers face this issue when working with background services. Let's break down the situation. One user reached out with a question about using the service class on Android O. They wanted to run a service in the background but encountered that pesky error. Sound familiar? If you're facing this, let's explore the reasons behind it. So what's happening here? When you call Start Foreground Service, the system expects you to call Start Foreground shortly after. If you don't, it throws that error. This is part of Android's restrictions on background services to improve battery life and performance. And hang tight. At the end of this video, I'll share a quick tip to help you avoid this error in the future. You won't want to miss it. To address the error, the user should first ensure that the service is properly set up to call Start Foreground within 5 seconds after calling Start Foreground Service. Next, the user needs to create a notification that will be displayed when the service is running in the foreground. This notification is essential for the foreground service. After creating the notification, the user should call Start Foreground with the notification object. This step is necessary to properly start the foreground service. Finally, the user should test the service to ensure it runs without errors. They can do this by starting the service and checking the logs for any issues. Fun fact: did you know that the first version of Android was released in 2008? It's come a long way since then, but some of these issues still trip up developers today. Now, let's look at the answers provided by other users. One alternative solution comes from Google's documentation on Android 12 behavior changes. It explains that the system can delay the display of foreground service notifications by up to 10 seconds for certain services. This allows short-lived tasks to complete before their notifications appear. The recommended approach is to call Start Foreground in the onCreate method of your service after using Context.startForegroundService. Let's take a look at an answer from another user. This user suggests that when using Start Foreground Service, you must call Service.startForeground in the onCreate method. This ensures that the service is properly set up. If there are conditions that might prevent this, they recommend using the regular Start Service method instead. Let's move forward and look at another answer. One user facing the same issue suggests a solution. They recommend adding specific code in the onCreate method for a service or in the onHandleIntent method for an intent service. This code creates a notification channel and starts the foreground service correctly. That's all for that response. Let's see what someone else had to say. This user points out that if you stop the service immediately, you still need to call Start Foreground before Stop Self, even if the service isn't running long enough to trigger an ANR. They also mentioned trying an approach that checks the SDK version to decide whether to use Start Foreground Service or Start Service, but they still encounter errors. As a temporary solution, they are using Start Service directly until the error is resolved. Now, let's shift our focus to a different response. One user identified that the error occurs when the service is stopped before it can be promoted to the foreground. They suggest adding a delay after calling Start Foreground Service to ensure the service has time to transition properly. After implementing this delay, the user reported that the issue was resolved in their next build, indicating a successful workaround. Here's that quick tip I promised. Always remember to call Start Foreground immediately after Start Foreground Service. This simple step can save you a lot of headaches down the line. And there you have it. By following these steps, you should be able to resolve that pesky error and get your service running smoothly. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more tips and tricks on Android development.